Well, everyone, I'm delighted to welcome Ben Higgins to the Storybox podcast today. Ben is an American reality TV star who starred on the 20th season of ABC's The Bachelor after appearing on the 11th season of The Bachelorette. In 2017, Higgins and his business partner, Riley Fuller and Drew Schroll, founded Generous Coffee, a Denver-based roasted coffee business. The company said it planned to use its profits to support non-profit organizations and other enterprises globally. You also co-host a podcast with Ashley Iconetti. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If I butchered her last name.
No.
Almost Famous. And I love this quote on your Instagram, which says, "Be kind, for everyone you know is fighting a hard battle." Ben Higgins, it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you to the Storybox podcast today.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolute pleasure, man. Absolute pleasure. Really keen to actually get into your story and how you got started in all this. But before we do that, I usually have one question that I love asking people to start off with, and that is, what does success look like to you?
Wow, what does success look like to me? It's funny. Let me tell you a quick story first. I was at a wedding a little over a year ago, and a guy that I had known for years, a real go-getter, kind of cornered me at one point, and he had said, he was kind of just talking. He's like, "Man, I was talking to my wife, and I realized that, I'd always wanted success, and I have more. He's like, I had more money. I have more money. I have time. I have a family." He's like, I realized I had reached success. And I said, "That's interesting." I said, "Why do you feel that way?" And he said, "Because I have everything I ever dreamed of, and but I'm going to keep going." And I was like, "Well, that's intriguing. If you really break it down, it felt like whatever he was defining success by was very material, and the family part was unique and interesting, but the material part of it was it just didn't process well to me, because I didn't understand how and when you define that you have enough to call it successful. And so there then, to me, has to be a better answer to that. And so when I started thinking about it and really sitting down to figure out what success looks like, what I think success looks like is when you get to a place in your life at any point in time that you are more focused on the needs of others than you necessarily need to be on the needs of yourself. And I think that's about as much as I would define it by, is when I stop thinking about how much I can get, how much I can gain, what boxes I've checked to consider myself to have done a job that's well done, then I think I'll be able to focus on others more. Because quite frankly, like if I had a dream of the best job in the world, I'll quote Tom Brady for a second, but it kind of goes back to, he got his 5th Super Bowl ring, and he at one point had said, "I always thought it was going to feel a little bit better than it does." Mm-hmm. And I think we have to look at that holistically and think about that in our lives. If you're reaching for material items, I think it's always going to unsatisfy you. So I guess success to me just looks almost like being satisfied enough to love others well.
I love that, man. And the saying is also very true, that you have to be selfish to yourself a little bit so you can be selfless to others. So you can know, like, for example, you mentioned there that you didn't really know what success was until you thought about it. That's you being selfish so you can figure it out. Mm-hmm. And then you realize, hang on a minute, it's actually me being a servant. And it's like, I'm a Christian, brought up like that. And I believe the ultimate form of success is being in service to others rather than being in service to just you, because that's what Christ did. Ultimately, he exemplified that. Everything that he ever did was for others, not for anything to do with himself, just giving. And I love how you equated success to that, man. So that's awesome. I want to ask you as well, how did your life, like, did you always want to be a television star? How did you grow up? What were some of the lessons that you were taught by your parents? We'll go right back.
Yeah, I'm an only child. Come from some just true, terrifically loving parents, and so that's one benefit that I've had in life. No, I can't say I've always dreamed of being a TV personality. In fact, I don't even know if when I was the Bachelor, if I really still understand fully how that happened. I do, though, remember always wanting a platform. I used to get in trouble in school for being too talkative, not exactly too opinionated. I just talk a lot. I think I liked attention. I think I liked having ears listening. I think I liked being involved. I say it now maybe because I've been understand it. Like I always enjoy, still to this day, having a seat at the table, being invited in, being welcomed in. And so, I didn't know that was going to play out like it did being the Bachelor. In fact, really none of my life ever aligned to do that. I was working a kind of a minimum wage software job, writing user manuals. And then a lady signed me up. I was young, I was single. It worked out. I went on the show. That worked out. And then I was asked to be the Bachelor. And so there was really like, even then, if you look at like the signs, I don't think anybody was going, oh, he's going to be the next dude. And I'm kind of glad that's the way it worked out, because what it did, it kind of allowed me to process it. I had to process it, what it meant and why I was there later on. And when I was in it, I was just in it. So no, that's not it. I was raised in Indiana. It's a small little Midwestern state, in a small little town. I'd say very simple, and yet beautiful, because everybody in this town knows each other, which has its benefits and its downsides.
Can imagine.
Yeah. But now, then I moved to Denver after college, and that's where I am still today.
So what did you always envision yourself being like when you grew up? I think every kid sort of envisions themselves being something. What was that for you?
I think I put a lot of labels on myself. And so there's a period of time that I thought I was going to be an athlete. I'm a pretty big dude. At the time I was like 6'4", 210 pounds, and could throw an American football around pretty well. And then I blew my knee out twice. Done. In a moment's notice, sports is over. And so, would I have ever actually been an athlete? I don't really know. Probably not. I wasn't fast enough, but it was like what I thought I was going to do. It was what in my head, what I wanted to be. So at that point, then I kind of went through a season of deep depression and kind of feeling like my identity had been ripped away, and I was still living in the identity of being an athlete, yet wasn't an athlete any longer. So it sent me down a pretty brutal spiral of a lot of like opiates and pain medication, of a lot of addictions, a lot of just like ways to just numb any pain. And I lived in that for a while. And then there was a moment, I still remember it. I call it my big first come to Jesus moment was I was standing in the mirror looking at myself, and I was in college at the time. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and I don't know if anybody's ever done this. I really don't recommend it too often. It really freaks you out. But if you ever look at yourself in the eyes in the mirror, like if you ever take a few moments and just stare into your soul through your eyes. I remember doing that for whatever reason, because I don't do that often, and going, you're nowhere near the man that you want to be, and you're nowhere near the man that God intended you to be. And I wasn't. And I needed that moment. And so then to kind of fast forward, what I wanted to be from that point on was, I think the only way I could say, I didn't know if I had like a direction. What I really wanted to do was do something that mattered. I wanted to do something that made me feel like I had neglected, I think, the calling on my life, and neglected the gift that is life for so long, that all I wanted to do at that point was try to figure out what I can invest my life into that would allow me to feel like I was doing something that was a part of a greater kingdom. I don't think I knew what that was, but that was it. That was probably where I lied, and that's where I sat in. Now, there was still disappointment, right? I think you grow up and your family, your friends, the loved ones tell you you can be anything you want to be, and you're going to do amazing things in this world. And at that point, I hadn't really done much. I hadn't really done anything amazing. And so there was still even through that process, I don't want to say it was all of a sudden this aha moment was like, oh, everything's going to work out. No, it was still this like, what does this look like? What work do I need to put in? Who do I want to be? Who does God want me to be? And then it started the chipping away at some of the pieces that I'm still trying to chip away at today.
And I believe God does that for a specific reason, because life's all about learning and growing. And I think we reach those moments in our life where we look in the mirror and we think, is this who I really am? Is this where I need to be in my life? Is this where God wants me to be? And I think God always, I was speaking to someone the other day about this, about our purpose and really knowing where God wants us in our life. And I think that we're never not in the center of God's will. We are exactly where he wants us to be in that specific place and time. It's us that always says, I'm not where I need to be, or where I think God needs me to be. And that sort of gets us to a place of moving forward. And that's, I guess, what God wants us to do as well, is to move forward and become better. And like sometimes we need to go through the hardship in order to get to the good parts in our life. And I'm curious, man, like you were in this state of depression, and you mentioned there for a moment that you weren't the man that God intended you to be. And I'm curious, what do you think a real man is in today's society?
A real man, I think it's a man that desires unity. A human that desires unity. I think it's a human that desires to love others well, like sacrificially well. And I think it's somebody that's vulnerable, that can look at another man in the face and say, man, I'm struggling. I'm hurting. I'm weak. I'm confused. I'm underqualified. I'm whatever. I think I don't know a lot, but what I'm seeing as I get older is that we connect best with every generation through our shared pains and our shared struggles and our shared failures. And I don't think we're going to be able to connect with others unless we start talking about those shared pains and struggles and failures. And so what I really am drawn to in the men in my life that are around me are men that I know will invest their life experience in me through a connecting point. And I think that connecting point is saying, man, I've lived years of my life feeling purposeless, shame-filled, joyless, and then allowing us to work together to get there. And that's what I think a man looks like today. I think it's a man that can do that. I also think I think a man is somebody that's, driven too, like passionately driven to experience life, to see beauty, to witness the world around them, to slow down, to take a second and look left and right at what's going on. I think that's another sign of just a good, solid, mature human. But yeah, maybe the most radical word I'd use to describe men today would be vulnerable.
I like that. I think there's not many men, because I was conditioned growing up. I believe, and what I saw, that men don't get vulnerable. Men don't cry. They don't share their feelings. That's a bad thing. Stay away from it. But nowadays, it seems to be the complete opposite, because there's a lot of men that are hurting on the inside, but they don't want to show it. And I think vulnerability is taken for granted a lot, because there's that fear associated with being vulnerable of what people are going to think of me. And it's that comparison syndrome, like when I look at somebody else, they look like they have everything together. So if I was to share to somebody else that I don't have everything together, then what are you going to think of me? But the amazing thing is, when you are vulnerable, you realize that no one has everything together. We all have our inner demons, you can call them. our own struggles, our own failures, and our own things that we need to learn. And I think the best part of life, going back to the success part, is just being in service to helping others. And that's what I love about stories. And so what I love about your story is you're being vulnerable here for a moment and sharing, okay, this is what I believe a man is. That's the core of a person. It's the belief. And I think the belief needs to be um, shared a lot more, that this is what a real man is. So for those men that are listening, it's okay to be vulnerable. There's too many, like, I'm passionate about mental health, Ben, because I have been through it. I know what it's like to be depressed. I was 14 years old, depressed, and then more recently, last year, I was depressed. And losing your identity, and I went through a pretty difficult breakup and lost who I was for pretty much most of last year. And it's getting to that point of understanding. It's like looking in that mirror again. And it's like, well, who are you, Jay? Who are you really? What do you really want? And how are you going to move forward from this? And I think a similar thing, except without the breakup, but just the injury for you, that happened. Mm-hmm. And it's very true for other people as well. The same thing happens, but it's knowing that it's okay to go to somebody and share that makes all the difference.
Mm-hmm. No, you're spot on. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you, Ben, moving forward. So you got a job in minimum wage, you're working there, and then someone comes to you and asks you if you wanted to be on The Bachelor?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was sitting at my desk, and the marketing head of the company came and said, hey, I love this Bachelor show. You're the only person, because my company was a little older, that I know that's single, that's out here, that could probably like have the time to do it, which I don't know if that's a compliment or not. But he said, if I sign you up and they call you, would you answer? I said, yeah, I would definitely answer. And so she did. And a week later they called and asked for a bunch of stuff, pictures, videos, interviews. And 6 months later, I was walking into the mansion in Los Angeles. There's nothing like sexy or like fairy tale-ish to it. It's like very much a phone call, them saying you're on the show, me thinking that I have no clue what's about to happen, and then being on a show now that I talk about every day somehow, some way.
So yeah. I don't want to focus too much on you being on The Bachelor. What I do want to ask you though is, what was the biggest lesson that you learned being on all these reality TV shows?
Man, it's a ton. The biggest lesson. So like if I think about my biggest, it'd be the lesson that's changed my life the most. Not to be cliche and like go off of your theme here, but I do think most times I talk about the show, the biggest one of that is that everybody does have a story. And that I grew up in a small town in Indiana that's, I don't even know, 90-some% white. That is, the unemployment rate is below 0.2%. That is a very wealthy, like healthy small town in terms of the economy. And it's also, at one point in the time, not that long ago, was the Methodist capital of the world. So it is incredibly Christian. I say all this to say, like, diversity is not something that Warsaw, Indiana prides itself on. And what I realized was that my worldview was very small, that I was very much stuck in my ways, that I was scared to be wrong, to be questioned, to question what I had learned as I grew up, question what I had been taught in school and church, in my family environment, that I was living a very easy, simple, straightforward life. And what the show taught me was that everybody has a story. Everybody's story matters, and that story has directly affected, for the most part, why they respond to things and who they are today. And that everybody's story really matters. That your story might be, for me, as somebody that does believe that Jesus exists, your story might be the one thing that points you and points others to the most truth-filled part of Jesus. Because it's the one experience that you have in your life that nobody can argue with if it's true or not. The second is that stories shape us. And my assumptions about people, my assumptions about people groups, my assumptions about culture are all wrong until I start to listen and hear those stories and allow that to shape how I see people and why and what I believe in people. I know that would be my biggest lesson, because I don't think without the show, I mean, I'd lived 25 years of my life never having to ask anybody about their story. And the show forced me to do that, and then showed me the beauty in doing that.
I love it. Even though it's cliche, it's so true. And that's what I thrive off as well, is people's stories and learning from what they've been through. And I think we can all relate to some way or another, people's stories. So stories can either build up or they can tear down. The question really is towards leadership. And that's what I want to ask you as well. Like, how have you become such a good leader in your relationship with Jessica, in your relationship in your business? What does that mean to you? Good, real leadership.
You asked me a good softball question, because I just answered this yesterday. So I was thinking about this. So if this comes too quickly, you know why. I think in the same breath, I think a good leader assumes never and listens first. And I think the sign of the best leaders, and it was something I'm still working on, but I think the sign of the best leaders are the ones that show the most empathy. They don't have to not have a backbone. They don't have to not follow what they see and feel and believe is right. They've been put in leadership because of probably their critical thinking and their ability to process and strategize. But when it comes to cultural enhancements in a business, cultural enhancements in your relationships, cultural enhancements in your friendships, I think empathy is vitally important and incredibly underrated in leadership. Maybe the biggest burden of a leader is stewarding the fact that you are carrying the stories of one person, 10 people, 100 people, 100,000 people, that their stories, you're directly associated with them and you're helping form at some level. And so it's a beautiful burden. So it's one that I don't take lightly. But I think it is the differentiator between a great leader and an average leader is, are you empathetic towards the stories of your business, of your relationships, of your people that are in your network?
I love that. I love how you pointed it to the stories. That's so cool. I never heard leadership described that way before.
Oh, cool.
I think that's
good. I always like to have something new. I'm trying.
That's awesome, man. Like, I had someone once tell me this is what changed my life with leadership. He sits down with me, he looks me in the eyes and he's like, Jay, everyone is a leader. The difference is you can either be a good one or you can be a bad one. And I was like, man, it's like a massive challenge. Like, when it hits you. And that hit me. Like, that hit me to the core, the empathy part, relating it to the story. That's so cool. And what did you say? A good leader listens first, and then what?
Listens first and then decides on their response. So you show, I think, to summarize it, like, it's empathy. It's listening to then relate. And if you can relate, then you can guide. And I think we listen first to gather as much information as possible. Ask 1,000 questions so that you can make sure that your assumptions are never the reason you're reacting, because your assumptions typically are uneducated for the most part. They're not the full story. I don't see a lot of time in human history where assuming something has done many people well. I think when we see it, we ask and back up our thoughts, our feelings, and become educated in all scenarios, big and small.
Love it, man. Like my brain's going absolutely nuts. Like I'm trying to focus on my next bit. That's great.
Cool.
You mentioned there in the beginning that, you brought up in a small town and very Methodist, very Christian based. What does faith mean to you, and how has God made himself real in your life?
Yeah. What does faith mean to me? Well, personally, I don't see, selfishly, I would say that I don't see a point to this whole thing unless there is a God that exists. And that God loves us. I get the love part because, one, I have to take into account that's how I was raised, that there is a God of love, of unity. But with that being said, I also look at the world around me through the news, through the economy, through relationships, through networks, whatever. And I see that when love is at the center, empathy is at the center, understanding is at the center, of sacrifice is at the center, of kinship, let's call it kinship, is at the center, then things function at a lot higher level, and they function in a lot more of a beautiful way, which I think is a picture of God. When things are beautiful, then I have to believe that is a picture of the God who created beauty. So that's kind of my selfish thoughts on faith. I also think I've thrown all my eggs in the basket. If one day I find out that this God never existed, for me, at least I give it my best shot. When I ask myself the question of why are we here? What is this thing? Which I ask myself often. In fact, in an hour and a half, I'm going to counseling because that question has consumed me since I was a young kid, is what is this all about? Why am I here? Is this meaningless, purposeless? Is this by accident? Those questions consistently revolve in my mind. And I think when I ask those questions, there's only really one answer that satisfies, and that there is a purpose, because we are a part of something. We are in the midst of something. We are working towards something. We are united together in some way. Unity is a big word right now around the world, right? With the movements, and in the US, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, unity seems to be what everybody's crying for. Why? You ask yourself, if this is all meaningless, why? Because humans need to love humans? Sure, yes. Because humans want to feel connected to humans? Yeah, sure. Because everybody matters? 100%. And is there a people group that's been suppressed and pushed aside? Definitely. And when we see that, we need to show empathy and look left and right and say, how can we help? No matter who it is. That's our calling. That's the Good Samaritan, is we don't walk by people who are hurting. We listen, we understand, we process, and then we move forward, hopefully bringing as many people into the story as possible. And I think if unity is such a calling and a desire of the human heart, then there has to be a reason why. There has to be a motivation why. There has to be something inside of us that says we are meant for something greater together. And for me, the greater has to be God. So that is what faith looks like to me. I don't know. I forget the second question.
How has God made himself real in your life?
Oh, well, I just mentioned a couple scenarios where I've seen, I think, God at work. The other is any time in my life that I've desperately called out for God, which, don't get me wrong here, there's very actually few moments where I feel like a desperate, anxious, panic, despair of I need something more. I need to know that I'm not the greatest thing out there. I need to know that there is something greater than I and my neighbor and my friends. Anytime that has came from a place of desire and need, he's shown up, and like in ways that I forget still at times, that I will be life changed by and then move on and forget, but that God has shown up, and I can't forget those times that God has shown up. I also think that I've done a really bad job at recognizing God in the small things, in the birds of the air, in the leaves on the trees, in the snow that falls, in the conversations with friends, in the nights where we eat great food and drink great drink, and we chat and we talk life. The moments where that I think I've overlooked too often, and instead I've always wanted the big home run hits from God, the ones that just wake you up. And I'm starting to recognize that maybe that's great and it's needed still at times, but maybe, just maybe, God is active and moving around me at this moment. And what does that look like when I recognize it?
I love how you mentioned recognize God in the small things. I think we get to a place in life that we get so busy that we often forget that. And it's always good to be reminded of that. So thank you for sharing that, man. And I know for my life, and I love how you mentioned that God makes himself known to you all the time, every time you've called out to him. And that's very, very similar to me and what's happened in my life. Every single time that I've been through hardship or been in incredible amounts of pain, and I have, like if I was to share with you like half the things that I've been through, you'd be like, what? But all the times that I've been in the hospital bed, not very close to meeting God, I've asked him, firstly, why am I here to begin with? And what do you want me to do with this? I know this is for a reason, because everything happens for a reason, because God orchestrated it. It's part of my purpose. It's part of my life. My purpose is not the destination. My purpose is part of the journey. And so when I come to realize that, then I can understand that God is sovereign. God knows best. I can trust him. I believe that he has a better plan for my life. I oftentimes we get impatient, Ben, and we think to ourselves, well, God hasn't worked what I thought he was going to work right now. So therefore, I'm going to try and do it myself. But then we always fall flat on our face, or we don't appreciate it as much because it's not, when God's timing is right, that feeling of satisfaction, that it's second to none. And I've noticed that in my own life is very similar to you. Every single time I've called out and asked God, I need your help, he's given his help. He's been there to comfort. He's been there to strengthen me. And I think it's sad for some people that don't actually have that basis of faith, that don't believe in God. And because he's real, he created everybody. He created the world. It's like trying to deny what's really there. People have done it all throughout history, even from the very beginning of time. You know, people try to deny what is good, what is right, what is true. And then what we're seeing with going back to unity, what we're seeing with the state of the world at the moment is people crave it, but yet they're running so far away from it. It's sad to see at the same time. It's like we're going to create one group, but not include everybody else. You know, like we talk about unity and what unity really looks like. It's not just focusing on one particular group that has been a minority for such a long period of time. It's coming to a place of understanding that we are all human. We all bleed the same color blood. It's no different. The only thing that makes us different is our works. But it's going back to, I honestly think, Ben, that if we all got to a place of just stopping and being grateful for what we have, can you imagine how different the world would be?
Yeah, you said it. We all crave unity, but for whatever reason, we all also run from it.
Mm.
And it's a unique paradox that I'm interested in, right? That I'm intrigued by. That it's confusing, I think, for many. I don't think I'm the only one out there going, okay, this is what I desire, yet I don't know how to get there.
Mm.
This is what I want, yet it scares me to what I'd have to give up to be in it. And that's where things get really interesting. That's where humans really start to get complex. Because then you bring in those things that you and I have talked about, our pasts, our shames, our regrets, our hurt. We start to have to bring those to the table and say, hey, you have a seat at the table, now so do I.
Mm-hmm.
And we can come together in something greater, whatever that looks like. Yeah, it's hard to do. And it's a journey and a battle worth fighting and advocating for and talking about and sharing and being attuned to. The other problem is it's not a quick process. It'd be great if all of a sudden one day we can say, okay, today's the day we're just going to test this out. We're going to all come together for one day. So let's give it a shot and see what happens and see if we like it or not. That doesn't happen. That's not going to happen. And so instead it is a generational molding and forming and cutting away and joining together that hopefully one day in our kids' kids' can look at it and go, you know, we're better now than we were then. I don't know. It's hard to say. I probably won't be around for it.
Mm. It's interesting to think about that. And I've had conversations, and I love having conversations like this because it gets you thinking, and it's real as well. Like it's deep. And I think when we ask the deep questions, that's where the value lies. And that's where the personal nature and the connection actually lies too. To be able to help people, you know. And I've
my buddy and I used to call them hot tub talks because we used to get in my parents' hot tub and sit underneath the stars, and like four of us dudes would go out there and we start talking about the stars and the galaxies, and all of a sudden we're talking about life and death, and you never know where it's going to take you. That's what we call it, and it feels like it now. And they were always some of our best times.
I didn't know where this conversation was going to go. I had a list of questions that are more like guiding questions. I think I've only asked like 2 of them. So I like where this is going. Now, I want to sort of shift it a little bit to relationships. Now, you've been on basically a worldwide stage, you could say, and being known for the person to be on a relation, be with someone on a show, but those relationships didn't work out, and now you're with somebody else. You're now engaged to somebody else who I have spoken with, and I can say she's honestly incredible.
Yeah, she's a winner,
mate. How did that happen? Like, tell me your side of the story.
It's wild, man. There's no good reason for it. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where Jessica lives. And I stayed in a hotel there for a fundraiser we were doing. And I saw a sports team checking into the hotel lobby. And I was like, I want to see what sports team that is. And so there were people taking like pictures with this team. And I was like, oh, somebody on Instagram had to have taken a picture and tagged the location already. I'll just look and see, and I'll find it that way. Well, so I got into my hotel room and I looked at the location I was staying at. And it was right next to a sports arena in Nashville where the hotel was. And the top picture that came up was Jessica's picture. And I don't know why, maybe it was the most recently posted or something. And I saw it and I said, that girl is gorgeous. And I was like, well, this is super creepy. I had no clue what to do with it. And so I just screenshot it because that's a lot less creepy is to have a random girl's picture on your phone.
Yeah,
to just messenger. Yeah. And so I held on to it for 6 months and kind of had forgotten about it. And 6 months later, I was celebrating Thanksgiving, and I was with my family, and we'd all gone to bed, and everybody gone to bed early, and I was up in my room, and during the day I wanted to take pictures with my family, and I'd ran out of storage space on my phone, and so I started cleaning out old pictures, and I came across that picture of Jessica, and I said, "Man, that girl's gorgeous." So that point, because I'd waited 6 months, it was now not as weird to message her. And so I messaged her on Instagram and I said, "Hey, don't ask too many questions, but if you're interested, I'll tell you." And 2 years later, almost, we are happily engaged. Like it's like the coolest thing ever. I literally didn't know that relationships could be as fun, as like free, as peace filled. Now we're still like in the honeymoon phase, right? It's only been 2 years, but the foundations of who she is to me and what I want to be to her, I think, are really solid. And so Instagram was a good avenue for me to find her.
How about that, right? Instagram's connecting couples.
That's right, man. I don't know. It's cool. I love it.
Yeah, man. I've met so many amazing people on Instagram, and when I met them in real life, it's like, this is awesome. You know, like,
yeah.
I'm not complaining at all.
No.
So how did you know that Jessica was the one for you as opposed to the others?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think like logically, I wanted to find somebody who would push me or support me to become a better man than I was without them. And I say that at the same time to say that I don't think relationships should be restrictive. I think there's boundaries, but I wanted to be free to be and be formed into and work towards that man that I was talking about in college. And Jessica just really is my biggest supporter for me to become the best man possible without forcing me into it. But, and it may be just my favorite word, because it's like the only one, like the only big word I know, but I really also was, I think I knew, not only is she incredibly gorgeous inside and out, and the way she treats her friends and her family and my family was just amazing and, never a problem. But the empathy she showed to everybody was just incredibly sexy to me, like so attractive. Like I was so romantically into the empathy she would show others because of her heart for them to be heard and to be seen and to be known. And I think that's really the moment when I started seeing that as a consistent theme and just like almost trusting, like if somebody would call me, there's a lot of girls, like women who work for Generous, and women would call me and confide in me. And there's a lot of times I don't know what the heck to say. When I started to go, who could talk to you about this is Jessica, and like having just full confidence and strength that she was going to do just a terrific job at it, or at least care. Maybe she wouldn't have answers, but she just care, is when I went, that is my partner. Like that is my teammate. That is my friend. And then it was just like a really fun thing to just continue to fall in love with that. So yeah, I mean, I think there was like a stepping stone, but for the most part, it was always known. It just wasn't always seen until I started to just really get to know her.
Were you looking for someone at the time that you reached out to her?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'd gotten pretty good being single too. I mean,
so have I.
Yeah, I had been in a pretty good, like, steady, do my thing, live in my house, mow my lawn when I want, hang out with my friends. Like I was pretty good at that. So kind of. I mean, I think I was always intrigued by the idea of romance, especially coming off of the show and with the breakup from the show. But I also was kind of like, you know what? I'm good being single. And Paul talks about that. And so I got a lot of confidence. Just like, I remember calling my mom up one day. Remember, I'm an only child, so my mom has one shot at grandkids. And
you got to live up to it, man.
yeah. And I called her. I said, Mom, I want you to know that you're gonna have to be okay with me being single, and that you have to know that I'm okay with it. Like, I'm good with it. And I said that with like a crackly voice. I was like, I don't actually know if I'm not okay with it. But again, I was pretty content.
That's funny, man, because I feel like in many ways there's sort of a bit of pressure on me. I've got two brothers, but I don't see my older brother getting married, and I don't see my younger brother getting married either or having kids. So they've all said to me, okay, Jay, you're it. You give mum grandkids. And I'm like, thanks.
Cool.
Is it? But I want kids. That's the thing. Like, I want to be a dad one day, and got to find someone first. That's
a good first step.
That's a good, exactly. But man, what's one lesson that Jessica has taught you? Now, I asked her a similar thing about you, and what she said was pretty interesting. I won't share it. You have to listen to the episode. But what is one lesson that you've learned from her in the last 2 years?
So many. I'd say one lesson romantically is that, like, I can come to Jessica, and she asks this of me, not physically but emotionally, like naked and unashamed. And I think for me to walk into a room, and if I'm like at my deepest, darkest moments, and say and tell her that, like, I know she in that moment has taught me to do that and not be scared of doing that around her. So, like, personally, I think because of that, what Jessica's taught me to do is become a better human. So, like, that's about as big as compliment as I can give her. She's just taught me to be a better human, because I can come to her with the most deepest of pains, confusions, of anger, and know that, like, I'm not going to leave that conversation, for the most part, feeling any type of shame. She doesn't want me to feel that shame. That she wants me to feel like I'm who God meant for me to be.
You'll have to listen to her response. I'm not gonna spoil anything.
She probably said something cool, like, I don't know what she would say. Hopefully it was kind.
Trust me, it was good. It was good. And yours was good too. So
cool.
If that's a hint. I haven't asked you about your current business. You've also got a podcast as well.
Yeah.
So I have probably about 3 more questions for you, if you don't mind. So I want to touch on the business. So how did that get started?
Definitely. I do have a meeting coming up in 4 minutes.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Scratch that. We'll go with the final question, which is my legacy question.
Okay.
So you've reached the age of 100, and your friends have put together a film for you of everything you've ever said and everything you've ever done. Don't ask me how they got it all. We just did. We'll call it magic. And they've shown it to you on your 100th birthday. What do you want the film to say and to show about your life?
I think what I wanted to say is that, like, I was kind of going back to the beginning. I had a seat at the table that I used this platform that all of us have, show or not show, that all of us have some type of platform, to give more than I took, and that people felt that like I was, that I was always there to give where I could. And I think if I could just see like a slideshow of those moments, of some of the ripples of that, I would say, well done. So I just want to be a part of stories, man. I desire to be a part of stories that I'm involved in, that others are involved in, that are redemptive, that are healthy, that are good. I want to see a slideshow of some crazy stories.
I love it, man. here on the Story Box. Thank you for sharing your stories to us today, man. Really enjoyed this conversation. Wish I had more time to ask you more questions and share more stories. But thank you so much, Ben Higgins, for coming on the Story Box podcast.
Hey, you're the man. Thanks a lot.